بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين واللعن على أعدائهم أجمعين من عداوتهم إلى قيام يوم الدين أما بعد فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه المجيد والفرقان الحميد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ومن يعظم شعائر الله فإنها من تقوى القلوب صدق الله العلي العظيم السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي هلت بثنائك عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزياراتكم السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين لا سيما أبا الفضل العباس وعلينا الأكبر صلوات محمد
اللهم صل على محمد.
This is the first night of Ashra Muharram, and the world over people are gathering in Hussainiyas, in masjids, and it's not just the Muslim world. America, Canada, South America. And then if you go across to the other side, Indonesia, Malaysia, Australia, these are the places where Ashra Muharram is being commemorated. And obviously the Muslim world as well. And even in Saudi Arabia, a Wahhabi state, you have Muharram being commemorated in Saudi Arabia, in Medina. So we are gathered not to do any favors to anybody. We're not gathered so that we can show ourselves that we have good Hussainis we are. It's actually, we are benefiting ourselves. And the ayah which I recited to you, whoever respects the signs of Allah, فَإِنَّهَا مِن تَقْوَى الْقُلُوبِ, for him or her, it is a sign of piety. فَإِنَّهَا مِن تَقْوَى الْقُلُوبِ, it is from amongst the signs of piety. Sha'air Allah. Hussainiyas are also Sha'air Allah because they are the source where you hear the message of Imam Hussain al-Islam. There are many, many perspectives in understanding Sha'air Allah. If I said to you, now Ali Asghar himself is Sha'air Allah. Ali Asghar al-Islam is also amongst the Sha'air Allah. He is also Ayatullah, a sign of Allah, and also Sha'air Allah. And when, during the course of Ashra Muharram, you will see the cradle of Ali Asghar coming. You will see the alam of Hazrat Abbas coming. For many of you participated in the creation of the alam. In the sense, you brought the materials and then you erected it. Many of you participated in creating the cradle of Hazrat Ali Asghar. You're the ones who created it. And then you start respecting it. How does that philosophy reconcile And this is the topic, inshallah, of my Ashra Muharram, is how do we reconcile in the modern world the concept of Sharia Allah. Ritualism, symbolism, how we spend many, many hours cleaning, preparing speeches for this occasion, for Muharram, when we can spend our time doing other things. You are sat here, spending time, 2-3 hours, when you could be earning money. So there must be something which is bringing you here. Whatever it is this particular hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This hadith is quoted in many, many sources, and it goes like this. And I've said this hadith to you before, but there is a particular point I want to raise from this particular hadith. The hadith is this: Inna li qatl al-Hussain hararatun fi qulub al-mu'minin la tabradu abadan. It says that the killing of Imam Hussain al-Islam, the martyrdom of Imam Hussain al-Islam, creates a harara, a heat, in the hearts of a mu'min, in the hearts of a mu'min. And that heat, which has been created, la tabradu abadan, it will never extinguish. Just keep that hadith in mind. The killing of Imam Hussain al-Islam will create in the hearts of a mu'min a heat. And in that heat, which becomes alive in you, that heat will never extinguish. And this is a mu'jiza. This is a mu'jiza. If one of our own relative dies, it doesn't have the same effect. After 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, after the 40th, we even forgotten who's dead. Our lives are back to normal again. What is there in Imam Hussain alayhi salam, in the shahadat of Imam Hussain alayhi salam, which makes us over 14 centuries come every year, and it seems as though that Karbala is today. It doesn't seem as though that it was 14 centuries ago. It seems as though we are reliving Karbala once again. But does it happen that when our own relative, our father, our mother, our brother, our sister dies, and then after the year has passed, the Barsi, 1 year, do we remember them in the same way? No. There is a effect. And believe you me, this effect is something which is baffling the Western world. And in universities, people are just researching why Azar has continued for 14 centuries. People are doing PhD research work on this subject. There is an American professor who actually wrote a book on this subject. He called it redemptive suffering. The whole concept of Azar as a redemptive suffering. I need to explain that, inshallah, over the course of the days. I will explain what he meant by this redemptive suffering. Because he was trying to unlock the key to Azar. Keeping this hadith in mind, there's another hadith which I want to join, and then look at the whole of this concept for today. There's another hadith which says, and I've said this before, but there's a particular link between the two, which I think you might find interesting. The other hadith is from Imam Jafar Sadiq al-Islam. It's a lengthy hadith, but it comes to this point. It says in this hadith that if one teardrop from an eye, one teardrop falls, and that teardrop is then thrown into Jahannam, the whole of Jahannam will become extinguished. Will become extinguished. And the hadith doesn't end there. It will become extinguished as though there was never a fire. One teardrop. Let's look at what a tear is. What is a tear? It's the weight of a tear is so insignificant. One drop. And what you have to bear in mind, that Imam Jafar Sadiq has said this not as a metaphor. Not as a metaphor in the sense to make the Shias cry. No, the hadith itself has the exact explicit meaning which is being referred to. That if this teardrop fell into Jahannam, it would extinguish the fire. It's not a metaphor. It's actual reality. Tears are an interesting concept in human beings. You can make your eyes make water by just cutting an onion. Your eyes will create tears just by cutting onions. Then your eyes can shed tears through happiness. Somebody is so overwhelmed with happiness, he starts crying. Then there's a tears of emotion, of pain and suffering. A question which I want you to just ponder over for one moment. 3 different types of tears. The tears, cutting an onion, the tears of happiness, and the tears of pain. They are created from the same water wells in our eyes. But if you want to check, you can check this. The composition of each different teardrop is different. The most powerful teardrop, having the most chemicals, is the ones which are created through emotion. The teardrops through cutting onions, there is no hormones in there. Whereas in the teardrops, which are created through emotions, they have hormones. Because it's a hormonal process which creates tears of pain and tears of passion. So tears themselves are different. And my brothers and sisters, maybe sat amongst us is somebody who during this course of Muharram will be able to create that teardrop. Will be able to create that teardrop which Imam Jafar Sadiq al-Islam has said, which Imam Jafar Sadiq has said will extinguish Jahannam. It is not beyond us to create that teardrop. The next question is, how can something so insignificant, like a teardrop from our eyes, have the power to extinguish Jahannam? The answer lies somewhere out there. And inshallah, we will look at this. What is the answer? So if a teardrop, which is so insignificant, can do this, what is so special about this teardrop? It is not the teardrop itself, brothers, women. It's not the teardrop itself. It's the teardrop to whom it's connected to. It's not the tear itself. It's for whom the tear was shed for. We talked about time before we started the Majlis. How people regard time as so insignificant. And how we don't, as Muslims, treat time as an important quantity and quality. We waste our times. We spend our times. But time itself is also connected to a bigger universe. Time in itself is so complicated. Time is complicated. To understand time, what is time? Is time the past, the present, the future? People say no. Time is just a continuum. It doesn't have past, present. It just continues. Time is now. What we are sitting, what we're doing now. The past is just a memory, but it becomes part of our existence, our meaning. But time, when it becomes connected, attached to something more superior, that time becomes full of value. Our sitting here is not so that we can pass time. We are serving a purpose, and that purpose is to remember Imam Hussain alayhi salam. I said this during Jummah, that we need to explain things. Hajj is something that needs explanation. We do not understand all the concepts of Hajj. Does that mean the Hajj becomes meaningless? No. Hajj needs explanation. We need to explain why we do all the manasiks, the rituals of Hajj. The rituals of Hajj are connected to a higher being, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah has ordained that we do the manasiks of Hajj. I'm not going to go through all of them because that's not the point. You know what the manasiks of Hajj are, what the rituals of Hajj are. They're not just futile time wasting. You are engaging in a devotional act. It's called an ibadah, a devotional act. And that devotional act has reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You are rewarded. In the same way, you are being rewarded for your attendance. Why? It's because you are attaching yourself to a higher being. And who is that higher being? Allah obviously creates the Imams. He gives them the roles that they engage in. And then we remember the Imams and we have an attachment to the Imams. And this crying that we are engaging with is because it becomes of a greater status because the attachment to Imam Hussain al-Islam. In a modern world, in a materialistic world, people look at time as being so valuable. Also, time is money. It seems to be the in thing to say, time is money. But in this time, how are we as individuals going to benefit from the 10 days? What is our mental goal? What do we want to achieve after the 10th? Is it just we go through a process of commemorating the azab, commemorating the 10 days, and then our lives revert back to normal? I had this discussion with a Sunni. And he said, look, you Shias put so much emphasis on Muharram. Why? When you have Ramadan, if you want to be spiritually uplifted, you have Ramadan, Shahr Ramadan. Why don't you use the 30 days to uplift your spirits? When you say that you commemorate the 10 days in remembering Imam Hussain al-Islam, so that spiritually we become uplifted. There is a difference between Azar and Shahr Ramadan. There's a difference. The difference is obvious, but sometimes the most obvious things, if you put something really close to your eyes, you can't see it. Because we live with it, we can't see it. Shahr Ramadan is something that you as an individual enact. You go through your own process. You get up in the mornings, you begin your fast, and in the evening, by the time you break your fast, and you live your day accordingly. Okay, you might read the Quran, you might do extra salats, but that's you. But Muharram is something unique. For we are remembering collectively and we are crying collectively. We can go home and watch the TV and watch the Majlis. You can cry there. But the Imams have specifically asked us to have gatherings and to remember us in these gatherings. Another question which is posed. They say Islam itself is a religion of sabr. It's a religion where we should be patient. And if somebody dies, we shouldn't start crying. We shouldn't start to tearing our hairs out. We shouldn't start beating our chests. That's what Islam says. When somebody dies amongst our families, we're not allowed to do that. It is not permissible to do that. But the Imams of the Ahlul Bayt, they specifically organized these rituals of azab. They specifically asked us to read the ash'ars of the Ahlul Bayt. They asked us to change our daily lives on Ashura and the course of the 10 days. They've asked us specifically, why this sudden change between the sabr concept in Islam and then the open crying concept in Islam? The Imams were trying to give us a message in this. And sometimes, because we've lived with Azadari all our lives, we don't really understand why Imams were trying to do this. And inshallah, I will talk about why specifically Azar became a movement in the Muslim world for people to accept Shiism. You might think, how can this be? How can Azar be a way for Muslims to accept Shiism? And I have references amongst Sunni historians who have written that because the way the Shias were treated over history, people had this link with those who were oppressed. People said, and there's a whole subject on this issue in Islamic history. Sunnism had to create a new movement. Sunnism itself, and I'm not saying this as a Shia, I'm quoting Sunni sources. Sunnis themselves had to create a new type of Islam. The Islam that they inherited from their forefathers was not in accordance to what they wanted Islam to be. So they created a new concept in Islam, and that was called Sufism. Sufism is a form of Islam which embodied the concept of wilayah. The wilayah of Ali ibn Abi Talib and the wilayah of the Imams. The 12 Imams, this became common in the end of the 3rd and beginning of the 4th century. The whole concept of Sufism, so that they can encompass the Imamate and also of the Azhar, the Sufis. So, coming back to why we are here, why we collectively sit and remember Azhar, there's another concept in psychology. It's called emotional memory. You have memory when you remember things, what you did yesterday or the day before that. But there's another concept in memory. It's very powerful. It's called emotional memory. Emotional memory is when you have something happen to you and you can remember it. Every one of you can remember a tragedy in your family, to yourselves, illness, sickness, death. That is etched upon your emotional memories. It's etched into that mind of yours that you cannot forget this pain. And what the Imams were trying to do, they were trying to etch this onto our minds. Onto our minds. That whenever Muharram comes, you know that you will start to change. And I'm not sure where I read this or where I heard this. They say before Muharram, you should start to eat less meat and more dal, the lentils. Because it softens the heart. Because meat hardens the heart. Dal, lentils, adasa, it softens the heart. And it makes person cry easier. The crying becomes easier when your heart is soft. But if your heart is hardened with materialism, with dunya, you're attached to this dunya. The Imams wanted you to be detached, not attached, but detached from the dunya and then attached and linked to the azar of Imam Hussain. Another problem which I have faced amongst Shias, they say, and inshallah over the course of this, and I'll give you a new perspective on the whole concept of azar. And I'll give you a new concept of why even the colour in our Imam Barqas and Husainiyas have a subliminal effect upon us. An effect which perhaps we do not immediately realise, but has an effect on us. It's not something which happened all of a sudden. It's something which has been created in Shiaism to give that effect. If you go from east to west, from north to south, every Husainiyah is coloured with black. The alams are black. Why? Black has this subduing effect upon us. An effect of creating sadness in us. Even the environment becomes conducive to creating that effect of sadness. So, sadness linked to Imam Hussain al-Islam, the sacrifice of Imam Hussain al-Islam, it's all intertwined. And I'm not saying that over the 10 days I will deconstruct everything and then reconstruct it. I will only be able to look at few strands in this whole narrative, in this whole story. And if you look at this ayah which I read, وَمَن يُعَظِّمْ شَعَائِرَ اللَّهِ فَإِنَّهَا مِن تَقْوَى الْقُلُوبِ. People say, very, very scholarly people say this. They say, Shias, they worship things that they make themselves. They create the alams and then they go and kiss it. They create the taziyah and they kiss it. They create the cradle of Ali Asghar and then they kiss it. But inshallah, I will show to you that psychologically, it is a very powerful way of creating something alive again. How to create something which is in memory back to life. And the whole of Muharram is actually bringing 14th century's event in the 61 Hijri back to life again. Salawat Muhammad wa Another thing that our Muslim brothers say, look, we are also Muslim. Our Sunni brothers say this. They say, we're Muslims. We also love Imam Hussain al-Islam. We love the Ahlul Bayt. And we love Rasulullah. But we don't go to these ceremonies and then beat ourselves. Or cry. What's this that you're doing? And a question was asked to me by a student. The student said, I have heard and I read in a book that the reason why you beat yourselves is because you're the ones who killed Imam Hussain alayhi salam, and this is in because, and you're repenting for that sin that you committed. So you are beating yourselves because of this. Inshallah, this needs a bit of time to explain the background to the story. Where this story came from, why this was said, and what were the motives behind this. That the Shias killed Imam Hussain alayhi salam, and they are now repenting for that sin. And inshallah, this will be addressed in the course of these days. Coming back to the point where the Muslims say that we love the Ahlul Bayt, but we don't go around crying, we just commemorate it in a solemn way, and after that, we then finish. But you go around having julus, processions, having taziyas. This is not Islamic. So this, again, has to be addressed. Another very, very important thing, these are just questions I'm highlighting, that I want you to just, over the course of days, think about them, and look at them. Because sometimes the best way to start something is to question it. Look at the questions. What are the questions? If, and this is no exaggeration, if we did not have azan, Shiaism would have died within the 1st century of Islam. The azan of Imam Hussain al-Islam in 61 Hijri revolutionized the whole of the Muslim Ummah, and that is no exaggeration. It changed the mindset of whole of the Muslim Ummah. Not just the Shias. The Sunnis themselves, they did not know what to do. However, over the course of time, Sunnism created its own identity and Shiaism created its own identity. But this identity is because of Imam Hussain al-Islam and because of this sacrifice. So, coming to a draw and to a conclusion on this subject is that Imam Hussain al-Islam became the central figure in Shiaism. We have the concept of Imamah, but what Imam Hussain al-Islam did for Islam was unique. If we look at the martyrdoms of all the Imams, of all the Masums, if we look at the martyrdom of Bibi Fatima Zahra, it did not have the same effect, I have to say this, it did not have the same effect as the martyrdom of Imam Hussain al-Islam. And you need to actually analyze and assess the bigger picture in the Imamate. Why Imam Hussain al-Islam is so central in Shiaism. Imam Ali al-Islam, he also was martyred in Kufa. But the martyrdom of Imam Ali al-Islam did not have the same effect as the martyrdom of Imam Hussain al-Islam. And you know, we talk about it rained blood on Ashura. It rained blood on Ashura. It is also mentioned in history books, and Ibn Hajar Makki has also said this in his book, that it also rained blood on the martyrdom of Imam Ali al-Islam. Because the martyrdom of Imam Ali al-Islam is no mean martyrdom. It was one of the most tragic events in the history of humanity. The martyrdom of Imam Ali al-Islam was one of the greatest tragedies in humanity. And let me just emphasize this a bit more. You know, in the Quran, where Allah says, Naqat Allah wa suqiyaha, about Hazrat Saleh's Naqa. The killing of that Naqa was one of the most tragic events which Allah has mentioned in the Quran. Why? Because this Naqa belonged to Allah. Allah says, it's my Naqa, my camel. It's my she camel. And just give it water. But they killed that camel. And what happened? The whole area was destroyed. فَدَمْدَمَ عَلَيْهِمْ رَبُّهُمْ بِذَنْبِهِمْ فَسَوَّاهُ. They were completely destroyed. The same way, Allah says, Imam Ali is also mine. It has the same value and greater than the Naqat Allah. So the martyrdom of Imam Ali al-Islam did not create the same effect. Imam Hussain was poisoned in Medina. His martyrdom didn't have the same effect. Imam Hussain al-Islam's martyrdom was unique in the history of mankind. It was unique. And because of this uniqueness, we exist as Shias today. The blood of Imam Hussain al-Islam was so precious that because it spilled on the land of Karbala, the land of Karbala became a khaki shifa. It became muqaddas, holy. It becomes so holy that if you use khaki shifa, turba of Karbala, as medicine, you will find cure in it. It's not because Karbala. It's not because of Karbala. It's because of the blood of Imam Hussain al-Islam. The same way, our existence becomes meaningful when we are attached to Imam Hussain al-Islam. We have this attachment, and inshallah, over the course of 10 days, try to proactively, just don't sit as inactive mourning. Become proactive. What do I mean by that? By becoming proactive, you yourselves, as individuals, are going to make a vow today. That vow, that ahd, is that qasam, that you want to go away, and on the 10th of Muharram, when you hear the shahadats of Imam Hussain al-Islam, the shahadat of Ali Asghar, you want to create in you those passions, those pains, which create the teardrop, which can extinguish hell. That is your mission. That is your mission. Your mission is to create that teardrop which can extinguish hell. If hell could be extinguished, my brothers, if hell could be extinguished through one teardrop from your eyes, I will finish on this note. Proactively listen and proactively try to create something within yourselves. Don't make this Muharram like the past Muharrams. We are living in a modern age. We're living in an age where on a mobile phone you can access the whole world. You can access all books that you want just through a mobile phone. But does that mean that human emotions have changed? No, they haven't. The emotions are still the same. Humanity is still the same. The values, the culture has all changed. But humanity is still the same. We still have pain of loss and grief. So if one of your teardrops can extinguish Jahannam, just imagine your whole existence, your body, what value that has. I do not expect any of the Shias, when I say Shias, I mean Shias, to have anything to do with Jahannam. Because if their own teardrop has extinguished Jahannam, then their bodies are protected. And their bodies are protected even in the grave. And inshallah, over the course of Muharram, I will show you a photograph of an alim. After 30 years of lying in the grave, he is taken out and his body is exactly the same as though he's just died today. His eye is slightly open and you can see that his eye has not deteriorated. And this is an alim. And we have a photograph of that alim. So your bodies become valuable. They are valuable. Why? It's because you are attached. You are attached. You are linked to something more superior. And inshallah tomorrow I'll just describe the superiority of Imam Hussain. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم.